I never imagined my son would do this. And there's so much more you haven't heard yet. Subscribe to the channel and tell me in the comments where you're listening from. It was the sound that told me something was wrong. Not the ordinary hum of a neighbor's lawnmower on a Saturday morning, or the lazy rattle of the recycling truck a block over. This was heavier, clunkier, metal on metal, dragging weight over, gravel from the kitchen. I paused mid-motion, my hands still dusted with flour, the rolling pin balanced across the dough like a bridge. The smell of cinnamon and apples had just begun to fill the room, the kind of smell that usually meant a good day ahead. But this sound didn't belong to good days. I stepped closer to the window over the sink. The late morning light was sharp, the kind that throws every shadow into high relief. I saw it immediately, a dark green contractor's pickup rolling slowly up my driveway, followed by a flatbed stacked high with 2x4s, plywood sheets, bags of quick tea, and a cement mixer tied down with frayed yellow straps. My gate, the one Alan and I had painted white together 20 years ago, was swung open, as if it were theirs to open. Daniel climbed out first. My son, hands in motion, phone wedged between his shoulder and his ear, gesturing toward the back like he owned the place. No pause, no hello. His other hand swept the air like he was explaining square footage to someone on the other end of the call. Behind him came Carla, my daughter-in-law, sunglasses pushed up in her hair, holding a rolled blueprint tube under her arm like she'd just stepped off an HGTV set. She pointed toward Alan's apple tree, my apple tree now, and said something I couldn't hear. The contractor, broad-shouldered, dusty boots, baseball cap pulled low, hopped down from the flatbed and scanned my yard the way a man sizes up a plot he's about to tame. Something cold and electric moved up my spine. I reached for the dish towel without taking my eyes off them, drying my hands in slow, deliberate motions. I stepped out onto the porch. The wooden boards, sun-warmed from years of July heat, groaned faintly under my weight. This isn't happening. My voice wasn't loud. It didn't have to be. Daniel finally turned. He pulled the phone from his ear but didn't end the call, just lowered it to his chest. Mom, we already talked about this. I felt my lips pressed together. No, you talked to each other. And then you told me. That's not a conversation. Carla stepped forward, that polite half-smile plastered on, the one that says, let's keep this pleasant while I get my way. It's for the kids. Helen, a safe place for them to play, maybe a little study nook. You know how cramped it is, at our place. I let my gaze drift past her to where Alan's flowers still bloomed in defiance of late summer heat. Beyond them, the contractor was measuring steps with his boot, already picturing walls where there should be sky. That's my yard, Daniel sighed, the kind of sigh that's meant to make you feel unreasonable. Mom, one day it'll be ours anyway. I stepped out onto the porch. The wooden boards, sun-warmed from years of July heat, groaned faintly under my weight. This isn't happening. My voice wasn't loud. It didn't have to be. Daniel finally turned. He pulled the phone from his ear but didn't end the call, just lowered it to his chest. Mom, we already talked about this. I felt my lips pressed together. No, you talked to each other. And then you told me. That's not a conversation. Carla stepped forward, that polite half-smile plastered on, the one that says, let's keep this pleasant while I get my way. It's for the kids. Helen, a safe place for them to play, maybe a little study nook. You know how cramped it is, at our place. I let my gaze drift past her to where Alan's flowers still bloomed in defiance of late summer heat. Beyond them, the contractor was measuring steps with his boot, already picturing walls where there should be sky. That's my yard, Daniel sighed, the kind of sigh that's meant to make you feel unreasonable. Mom, one day it'll be ours anyway. I took the porch steps, slowly, closing the gap between us, forcing Daniel to look at me without the shield of distance. Put the phone away. Mom, now. He shoved it into his pocket. We're not tearing down anything, we're just getting started. This is the smart move for the family. For the family, I repeated, each word clipped. Whose definition are we using? Carla adjusted the tube under her arm. We're talking about improving the property, increasing its value. Its value to whom? The contractor shifted awkwardly, clearly wishing he were somewhere else. He started unloading a sheet of plywood anyway. The scrape of it against the flatbed grated in my ears. I took one step forward, my shadow crossing over Carla's shoes. Close the gate. Take the truck, Nothing comes off that land. Daniel's jaw tightened. Mom, you're making a scene. I'm making a boundary. For a moment, it was just the four of us in a standoff. Me on the porch steps, Daniel with his hands on his hips, Carla clutching her blueprints like a shield, the contractor holding a board midair, unsure whether to set it down or put it back. In my head, Alan's voice came to me as clear as if he were beside me. Protect what's yours, Helen. If you don't, no one else will. You have 5 minutes to clear my driveway, I said. After that, I call the sheriff and have them explain property rights to you. Carla blinked. Daniel's ears went red. The contractor set the board down, back onto the truck. They thought I'd back down, that I'd soften, like I always had when Daniel was young and pushing against my rules. But this wasn't a curfew. This was my home, my history, my life's work written in soil and wood. The story of our family, with a father, a mother, and 3 children, and not just one, as Daniel seemed to want it to be. I don't know if it was Carla or Daniel after all. And I wasn't about to let anyone, not even my own son, rewrite it without my permission. The truck's engine roared, then faded into the distance, leaving only the silence of my empty doorway. I didn't move. My hand rested on the frame, knuckles white, as if holding the house together by sheer will. They were gone because I made them leave, but the way the wind pushed against the old fence in the backyard told me it wasn't over. My fingers still curled slightly, as if ready to hold the dish towel again. The air in the kitchen felt thicker, heavier. My pie sat on the counter, untouched, the apples inside already browning at the edges. I leaned on the frame of the door, looking out at the yard. Alan's apple tree swayed gently, its leaves catching the light like coins in a fountain. Beyond it, the patch of grass where we'd once pitched a tent for Daniel's 10th birthday. I could almost hear the echo of children's laughter, carried by the wind. Neil didn't just live nearby, he lived right behind me. Our backyards touched, divided only by an old cedar fence that Alan and I had replaced years ago. From my kitchen window, I could see his patio, the narrow strip of lawn, and beyond that, the small storage shed he kept unlocked for Lucy's toys. It wasn't a bad arrangement, at least, it hadn't been. But when someone lives that close, neighbor can turn into intruder faster than you realize. I wasn't just Helen Lewis, 62 years old, widow, retired school librarian. I was the woman who had turned a half-acre lot and into a home so full of life that the walls practically hummed. I was the one who spent summer afternoons hammering nails beside Alan, learning to read blueprints because the contractor we could afford didn't speak much English, and my husband's Spanish stopped at hola. I was the one who planted marigolds along the front walk every April because Alan swore they kept pests away, though I secretly suspected he just liked the color. And I was the one who made sure Daniel had a safe yard to throw a football in, a tree to climb, and enough open space to run himself breathless. But somewhere along the way, the lines blurred. I wasn't just mom anymore. I was mom with a house, a resource, a piece of real estate. I remembered the first time I realized that Daniel had just turned 30. He and Carla had been married for 2 years. They came over for Sunday lunch, and between bites of roast chicken, Carla mentioned a hypothetical. What if they added a small guest house out back, just for friends, she'd said. For family visits. Alan was still alive then, and he gave her one of those warm, diplomatic smiles he was so good at. Sounds interesting, he said, which was his polite way of saying, not going to happen. After they left, I asked him why he hadn't just said no, because, he said, sometimes it's better to let people talk. They'll show you their real intentions if you give them room. Now, standing there alone, I wished I could ask him what he thought of today's real intentions. The kettle on the stove began to whistle, snapping me out of it. I poured myself a cup of tea, carried it to the kitchen table, and sat down with my back to the window. I didn't want to look out there right now. The tea was hot enough to sting, but I welcomed it. It grounded me. Here's the thing about family disputes. The law is one thing, but blood complicates it. You can evict a stranger. You can call the cops on a trespasser. But when it's your own son, every move feels like tearing a page out of a book you've been writing for decades. And yet, as I sat there, I knew I couldn't let this go. If I did, it wouldn't just be the yard they'd take. It would be my say in my own life. I pulled the old property folder from the cabinet. The one Alan used to joke was our shield. Inside were the original deed, the survey maps, the permits from when we'd added the porch and rebuilt the fence. Every piece of paper felt heavier than it should have, as if carrying the weight of every fight we'd already won to keep this place ours. As I spread them across the table, I realized something. I wasn't just preparing for an argument, I was preparing for a war. And this time, it would be fought across the dinner table, in phone calls, in the spaces between birthdays and holidays, all the invisible battlegrounds of family. I thought about calling Daniel right then, but I didn't. Instead, I sat there, tracing the ink on the deed with my fingertip, remembering the day we signed it. The pen had run out halfway through Alan's signature. He'd laughed, swapped it for mine, and said, "See, we're already sharing the load." It hit me like a wave, the ache of missing him, the frustration of standing alone now, and the steel resolve that was beginning to form beneath it all. I took a deep breath, stacked the papers neatly, and set them aside. I wasn't ready to make my move yet, not until I knew exactly how far they were willing to go. But one thing was certain. They had drawn the first line, and I intended to draw the last. From the corner of my eye, I thought I saw movement beyond the fence. Just a shadow, maybe, or maybe not. Either way, I knew the night hadn't finished with me yet. It started quietly, not with another truck in the driveway or blueprints on my porch, but with a phone call the very next morning. Double quotes. "Hi, Mom," Daniel said, his tone warm. "Too warm. You busy today?" I could hear traffic in the background, the rush of a morning commute. "Not really," I said cautiously. "Great. Carla is making her famous lasagna tonight. Why don't you come over? The kids have been asking for you." The way he said it was casual, but something in me tensed. Invitations from Daniel usually came with an aftertaste. Still, I went. Because saying no felt like losing ground before the fight had even begun. Their house was smaller than mine, but spotless. Carla met me at the door, kissed my cheek, and pressed a glass of wine into my hand before I'd even taken off my coat. "We've missed you," she said. "Haven't we, Danny?" Daniel smiled, guiding me toward the kitchen table where the kids were drawing. Little Lucy held up a crayon sketch, a big green yard, a slide, a swing set. "It's our new playground," she announced. I froze, my eyes flicking to Daniel. He looked away, busying himself with setting the table. Dinner smelled amazing, but I barely tasted it. Carla kept steering the conversation toward family projects, repainting the living room, upgrading their kitchen. Then, as if by accident, she sighed. "Of course, it'd be easier if we had just a little more space. Somewhere the kids could really run around, but that's just dreaming." I set my fork down slowly. "Dreaming," I repeated. Daniel reached over, squeezing my hand like he was sealing some unspoken agreement. "It's all about the family. Mom, you've always been about the family." A few days later, it was Carla again, this time showing up at my door with a plate of cookies and a stack of old photo albums. "Thought you'd like to go through these together," she said brightly. We sat in the living room, turning pages. Daniel at 6, holding a soccer ball in the yard. Daniel at 12, roasting marshmallows by the fire pit. Daniel at 17, leaning against the porch railing, grinning at me from under that messy hair he never cut short enough for school. Pictures. Every photo was a reminder. Look how much this place has meant to him. And then, Carla slid a folded piece of paper across the coffee table. "Don't be mad, just look at it." It was a drawing. My house, my yard, but with an added structure out back. Neat, modern, shaded by the apple tree. "It's not permanent," she said quickly. "We could even take it down one day. But for now, it could make such a difference." I didn't answer right away. I traced the lines of the drawing, the little details: a bench, a sandbox, a path of stepping stones that cut right across Alan's flower bed. Finally, I slid the paper back toward her. "You've been planning?" Carla's smile faltered. "We've been dreaming," she corrected. That night, lying in bed, I stared at the ceiling for hours. I could feel the house around me, its familiar creaks and sighs, the faint hum of the refrigerator, the tick of the hallway clock. I thought of Alan, of all the small decisions that had made this place ours. And I thought of Daniel, a boy who once asked if he could build a fort under the apple tree, and now a man who wanted to build something much bigger, without asking at all. By the end of the week, the calls came daily. Always light, always just checking in, always circling back to the same point. They weren't pushing against the gate anymore. They were pushing against me. That night, while closing the curtains, I caught a reflection in the glass, a shape, outside, to be the wind. When I turned to look, nothing was there. But the feeling lingered, I was being watched, and I could feel it. The pressure building, quiet, constant, unrelenting. It was a Sunday afternoon, warm for early spring. I had just finished sweeping the porch when I saw Daniel approaching. No warning this time, just him, alone, holding a cardboard box. "Hey Mom," he said, climbing the steps two at a time. "I was thinking of you. Thought I'd drop something off." I stepped aside so he could come in, but my gut was already alert. Daniel rarely just dropped by. He set the box on the coffee table and opened it. Inside were tools, jars of nails, rolls of measuring tape, and a brand new level still in the package. "What's all this?" I asked. "Well," he said, pulling out the level and clicking it against his palm, "the fence on the north side is leaning. Figured I'd help you fix it before it gets worse." I narrowed my eyes. That fence wasn't leaning, at least. Not enough to matter. "I can call someone," I said. "No need to waste money. Besides, I like doing it." Before I could argue, he was already outside, pulling the old fence gate open, looking for spots to measure. I followed, partly to supervise, partly because I didn't trust where this was going. He worked quickly, chatting about the kids, the weather, some new restaurant they'd tried. But as he measured along the fence, I noticed he wasn't just looking at the boards, he was looking at the yard, mapping it with his eyes. At one point, he crouched near the apple tree, pressed his hand into the dirt, and said, "This spot drains really well. Would be perfect for a foundation." I froze. "Foundation for what?" "Nothing," he said quickly, grinning. "Just thinking out loud." An hour later, the lean was fixed, though it hadn't really needed fixing in the first place, and Daniel was back inside, pouring himself a glass of iced tea. He glanced toward the back door. "You know, if you wanted, I could build a small storage shed out there, just for your gardening tools. Wouldn't take up much space." It sounded harmless enough, logical, even, and the truth was, I did need better storage. The garage was a mess. "It would have to match the house," I said slowly. His face lit up. "Of course, I'll even paint it the same color." And that's how it happened. With one nod, one small concession, I gave them the first foothold. The shed went up in less than a week. It was neat, tidy, painted the same soft blue as the house. But it wasn't just a shed. It was placement, from the kitchen window. I could see how it sat perfectly in line with the space Carla had drawn on that paper, the one with the bench and sandbox. The day it was finished, Carla came by to see it. She walked around it slowly, nodding. "Looks great," she said. Then, almost too softly, "and it doesn't even block the view. We could easily fit something else right there." Didn't answer. But I felt it. The shift, like the first creak of a door you thought was locked. That night I stood at the window long after the lights were off, staring at that new shed. In the moonlight, it seemed bigger than it was. Not just in size, in meaning. When the first wooden frame went up, I thought foolishly that they were building something for Lucy. The shape reminded me of the start of a small playhouse or playground set, but as the walls took form, it became clear. This wasn't for children, and it certainly wasn't for me. It was a tool shed, solid and permanent, pressed right up against our shared fence, too close, too deliberate. And it wasn't just a shed, it was an extension of their house, a quiet attempt to claim a piece of my yard as if it naturally belonged to them. That's when it hit me. If they could pull this off now, before I was even gone, it would carve away space that should belong to all my children, not just me, all of them. I realized then, I hadn't just allowed a structure, I had allowed an opening, and they knew it. It started with the lawn chairs. One morning, I looked out my kitchen window and saw them, two bright red folding chairs set up under the apple tree. They weren't mine. I hadn't put them there. At first I thought maybe Daniel had left them after fixing the fence, but when I went outside, I noticed a half-empty juice box on the ground and a small plastic toy truck parked neatly beside one of the chairs. I frowned, scanning the yard. Everything else was as it should be, the flower beds in order, the bird feeder swaying gently in the breeze, but those chairs, they didn't belong. Later that day, Carla called. "The kids had a picnic in your yard yesterday," she said, like it was the most natural thing in the world. "I hope you don't mind. We didn't want to bother you." I gripped the phone a little tighter. "You didn't bother me," I said carefully, "but you should have asked." She laughed lightly. "Oh, of course. Next time, we will. It's just, they love that tree." Next time came sooner than I expected. 2 days later, I came home from the grocery store to find Daniel's car parked halfway up my driveway. In the yard, he was tossing a frisbee to little Lucy, while Carla unpacked the cooler on one of the red chairs. "Mom, you're home," Daniel waved, as if I were a guest arriving at their barbecue. I stood there, holding my grocery bags, feeling like I'd just walked into someone else's property. "We thought we'd let the kids get some fresh air," Carla said cheerfully. "We'll be out of your hair in a bit." "Carla," I said slowly, "you can't just." But then Lucy ran up, clutching a dandelion bouquet, and pressed it into my hand. "For you, Grandma," she beamed. And just like that, my words dissolved. Over the next week, little things kept appearing. A soccer ball leaning against the shed, a folded blanket under the tree, a pair of muddy sneakers by the back steps. None of it was overt. None of it could be called taking over. But I could feel it, the unspoken assumption that my yard was now an extension of their own. One afternoon, I caught Daniel measuring again. This time, he didn't even pretend it was for repairs, just seeing how much space we'd have if we, hypothetically, extended the shed a bit, he said, with that half-smile that used to get him out of trouble as a kid. "You're not extending anything," I replied flatly. He raised his hands in mock surrender. Okay, just thinking out loud." But the real shift came the following Saturday. I was upstairs folding laundry when I heard laughter outside, not children's laughter, but adult voices. I peeked out the window and saw Carla and her sister sitting in the red chairs, sipping iced tea, as if they'd reserved the spot. "No, Daniel, no kids, just them." Something about that, the casual ownership, the way they didn't even glance at the house, made my chest tighten. This wasn't about visiting anymore. It was about belonging. That night, I didn't sleep much. I kept thinking about how easy it is to lose something, not with a storm or a fire, but with a series of tiny steps, each one small enough to ignore, until you look up and realize you're standing on less and less ground. And I could feel it. They were already inside the lines. It was a Sunday, the kind of warm golden afternoon that used to make this house feel like the safest place on earth. I had just set a pie on the windowsill to cool when I heard voices in the backyard. At first, I thought it was just the kids, but then I caught Daniel's laugh, and another voice, deeper, unfamiliar. I stepped to the window. There they were. Daniel, Carla, the kids, and two of Daniel's friends I'd never seen before. They were standing around the apple tree, sipping beer, while the children chased each other between my flower beds. The red chairs were out again. The cooler was open. And near the shed, I noticed something new. A long plank of wood resting on sawhorses, tools laid neatly beside it. They were building something. I went out the back door, forcing my voice to stay calm. "Daniel, what's going on here?" He looked up, all casual charm. "Oh, hey Mom, we're putting together a bench. Thought it'd be nice for you to sit out here with the kids." I stared at the plank, the tools, the sawdust already on my grass. Without asking me, Carla stepped in, smiling that smile she uses when she's about to deflect. "It's just a bench, Helen. We're doing something for you." I felt my jaw tighten. "No, you're doing something to my yard." "There's a difference," Daniel chuckled, under his breath, as if I were making a joke I didn't know about. "Come on, Mom. It's not like we're building a garage." The tension was thick enough to taste. One of Daniel's friends glanced between us, sensing the shift. Carla busied herself with the cooler, handing out drinks to avoid looking at me. I took a step closer. "Daniel, take it apart." He blinked. "What? You heard me. I don't want it. Take it apart and get it off my property." For a long moment, no one moved. The only sound was the wind shifting the leaves in the apple tree. Finally, Daniel shook his head. "You're being ridiculous." That was it. The crack that split the dam. Ridiculous. My voice was shaking now, but not from uncertainty. "Do you know what's ridiculous, Daniel? It's my yard. It's my house. And somehow, in the last few months, you've decided you can just walk in, bring your friends, leave your things, build whatever you want, as if I'm just some old woman who should be grateful for the attention." Carla stepped forward, defensive. "We were trying to make it nice. For who?" I cut her off. "For me, or for yourselves? Because from where I'm standing, it looks a lot more like you're getting comfortable with the idea that this place is already yours." The kids had gone quiet. Little Lucy was standing by the shed, holding a juice box, watching with wide eyes. Daniel glanced at her, then back at me, his voice colder now. This is exactly why Dad said you were impossible to deal with. The words hit like a slap. My husband had been gone for years, but the fact Daniel would throw him into this here, in my own backyard, made something inside me snap. Get out. My voice was low, steady, deadly calm. Mom, take your chairs, take your cooler, take your friends, and don't come back here without asking first. For a second, I thought he might refuse. His jaw tightened, and I could see the muscle twitch in his cheek. But then Carla muttered something to him, and he looked away. They packed slowly, deliberately, like every movement was a statement. When the last chair folded, Daniel finally met my eyes. You're making a mistake. No, I said. I'm stopping one. When the gate clicked shut behind them, the yard was silent again. Too silent. I stood there for a long time, looking at the spot where the bench would have been. And for the first time, I wondered, had I just drawn a line, or started a war? For 2 days, I didn't hear from Daniel. The silence was louder than any argument we'd ever had. No calls, no texts, no casual hi. Mom dropping in at the end of the day. I told myself it was a relief, that I could finally have my space back. But relief doesn't make you check your phone 3 times before breakfast. Relief doesn't make you stare at the driveway every time a car passes. On the 3rd day, I saw Carla at the grocery store. She spotted me first, but instead of waving, she turned to the woman beside her and whispered something. They both looked at me, not directly, but just long enough for me to feel it, then walked away. Their cart rattling down another aisle. That afternoon, a neighbor, Mrs. Perry, stopped by to return a baking dish I'd loaned her. I saw Daniel the other day, she said casually. He mentioned you weren't feeling well. Said you've been a bit on edge lately. I felt heat rising in my cheeks. Did he now? Oh, I'm sure he didn't mean anything by it, she added quickly, but her eyes said otherwise. That night, I found the frisbee in the yard again. I hadn't seen it since the day of the barbecue, but there it was, bright blue against the grass, perfectly centered in the middle of my lawn. I stood there in the dark, staring at it. Was it an accident, or was it a message? A few days later, the phone rang. Mom, Daniel's voice was flat, formal. We're having a family get-together this weekend, at our place. I think it'd be good for everyone if you came. Why? I asked. So people can see your... The pause that followed was heavy. And if I don't come, that's your choice, he said. But people talk. When I hung up, my hands were trembling, not from fear, but from recognition. This wasn't about reconciliation. It was about optics. They wanted me there so they could paint a picture, one where I was the unreasonable one, the unstable one. The next morning, I caught sight of Carla again. She was walking past my house with Lucy, holding her hand tightly. Lucy saw me through the window and waved enthusiastically. But Carla didn't stop, didn't even look, just kept walking, her jaw set, her steps deliberate. Every little thing felt like a chess move now. The silence, the whispers, the objects left behind in my yard. None of it big enough to call out without sounding paranoid. All of it small enough to be dismissed as coincidence. But I knew better. They weren't done. They were regrouping. The next move would be theirs. That night, I sat at the kitchen table with a yellow legal pad and wrote a single question at the top. What did we actually teach him? Not what we said. What we taught, because children learn from the gap between the rules and the exceptions we make for the people we love. I thought about Alan and the way he parented, patient, steady, never loud unless safety was involved. We set rules so freedom is possible. He'd say not to control, but to keep the game fair. He coached Little League one summer and made every kid, even the star shortstop, put the bat back on the rack before they ran bases. Order isn't punishment, he told them. It's respect for the next person who needs this. The memories lined up like photographs. Daniel at 9, building a fort under the apple tree, hammer in hand, nails crooked, eyes bright. He asked permission first. We walked the yard together and marked a spot where he wouldn't tear up the roots or stomp on the marigolds. That fort stood all summer, not because he wanted it, but because he learned how to keep it standing. Daniel at 12, a baseball through the neighbor's window. Alan didn't pay for it. He walked Daniel to their door with the mason jar money from Daniel's allowance. And Daniel apologized, then mowed that lawn every Saturday for a month. It wasn't humiliation. It was consequence. Daniel, at 17, arguing curfew on the back porch, trying to lawyer his way into midnight. Alan listened, then said, You can disagree with the rule, son, but if you break it, you own it. Daniel came home at 12:07 the next night and handed us his keys without being asked. For a week, he took the bus. I pressed the pen to the paper and wrote underneath the question, "We teach by the lines we keep after we say no." Somewhere in the past year, I'd gotten softer, not kinder, softer. I'd let just today become fine, this once, and this once become a pattern. Not because I didn't know better, but because peace is seductive when you're tired. The lesson you skip on Tuesday becomes permission on Thursday. I raised Daniel to work for what he wanted, not to take what wasn't his. But over time, I saw Carla's influence shaping him in ways I didn't recognize. She was subtle, always smiling, always just suggesting. But those suggestions had turned into plans, and those plans were now eating into my land, and maybe, just maybe, into the inheritance his siblings would one day expect, if I wanted Daniel to relearn the old lesson, the one about boundaries, meaning love, not rejection. I had to teach it the only way lessons ever hold, with structure. I reached for the phone and dialed the number of a long-time and very skilled friend. "Ralph," I said when he answered, "I need a favor, a polite deterrent system." He laughed like he always does when I name things. "What's the syllabus, Professor Helen?" "Lights, sound, sprinklers, and a camera aimed at the side gate, off by default. No traps, no scare tactics. Clear warnings, then a consequence." 2 days later, his van was in my driveway. We walked the yard like two people setting up a classroom, motion sensors tucked where you wouldn't notice them unless you knew, LED strips under the edge of the deck to wash the boards with cool light, 2 small speakers hidden in planters, a discreet sprinkler head aimed at the narrow pass by the shed, not a soak, just a curtain. I recorded the first message myself, speaking the way I used to in the library when a group of 7th graders got too loud, calm, measured, undeniable, private, property, permission required, please step back. The second message layered in more urgency. Alert, unauthorized access, irrigation system will activate. We tested. On the third pass, Ralph deliberately crossed the line. My voice sounded. The LEDs came alive. The low hum under the sound kerneled into his ribs. Then the sprinkler arced a bright, perfect fan of water across his shins. Ralph spread his arms and laughed, dripping pedagogical enough. Didactic even, I said, and surprised myself by laughing too. We left the camera off. I didn't want to catch anyone. I wanted to teach them how not to be caught. On Friday I sent a text, Sunday lunch, 1 p.m. pot roast, bring the kids. I laid the table the way Alan liked, cloth napkins, real plates, the good glasses that catch the window light. A teacher doesn't start class by scolding. She starts with welcome, so the rule feels like care when it arrives. Carla brought a salad and a careful smile. Daniel came in carrying Peter on his hip. Lucy ran straight to the back door and pressed her nose to the glass. We ate, we asked about school, I complimented Carla's vinaigrette. Then, when the coffee was poured and the kids were on the porch with popsicles, I stood and went to the sideboard. The manila folder looked the same as it always had, but what it contained now was different. "I want to show you something," I said, setting the folder on the table and opening it. "This is the deed. This is the survey. These are the permits for the porch and the fence. You've seen them before." Daniel glanced at them and leaned back, guarded. Carla folded her hands, eyes cool. "And this," I said, sliding a fresh document forward, "is my updated will." Carla's eyebrows lifted. "You're bringing the will into this. I'm bringing clarity into this." I met both of their eyes. "It now states that this property remains mine exclusively for the rest of my life. Upon my death, the house and lot will be divided equally among my children. Any attempt to take, build on, or pressure me regarding this property while I'm alive voids that person's share. That portion will be donated to the county literacy fund in Alan's name." Daniel's face flushed. "You'd cut your own son out of your inheritance? I'd protect what's mine while I'm alive. That's my job. Your job is to respect the person who made your childhood possible." Carla's voice turned sugar. "That sounds punitive." "It's protective," I said. "I'm not punishing you. I'm drawing the line I should have drawn months ago. In ink you can't pretend you didn't see." Daniel put both hands on the table like he might push the whole thing away. "So we have to tiptoe around you for the rest of your life." "No," I said, softer. "You have to ask. You have to wait for, yes, that's all." Lucy reappeared at the door, mouth purple from popsicle. "Grandma, can we water my tree?" I smiled at her, grateful for the timing that children always seem to carry. "Yes, baby, let me show mommy first." We walked out together. The maple and the dogwood stood in the back corner, new and small but certain, each with a little wooden plaque I'd sealed in varnish, "Lucy and Peter." I handed Lucy the hose. She watered with the solemn focus kids reserve for serious work. Peter clapped when a drop glittered on a leaf. "Family things are meant to grow," I said quietly, looking at Carla, without ripping up someone else's roots. Something flickered across her face. Not surrender. Something like recognition. That moment when the test answer you wanted isn't the one the question requires. Back inside, Daniel hovered by the folder. "So if we do nothing, everything stays equal. If you respect me." "Yes," I said. "You don't even have to agree with me. You just have to stop acting like this is already yours." He exhaled, a sound with edges. "And if the foundation cracks, are you going to ask me for help then?" "If the foundation cracks," I said, "I'll call a contractor. If I need you, I'll ask. Like I'm asking now for you to leave my property lines alone. No shouting, no door slamming." The lesson had to sound like a rule that would be true next week and next month, not like a threat I'd double back on by Tuesday. They left with the children and their salad bowl and the knowledge that the ground had changed. Before the gate closed, Carla turned just enough for me to hear. "You can't hold it forever." I let myself breathe. The system was in place. The paper was in place. The words were in place. If they came back the old way, with charm, with pressure, with just a bench, the yard would do the teaching for me. Warning, warning, water. If they came back a new way, with something meant to hurt, then at least we were all clear on what would be lost. As I washed the coffee cups, I caught my reflection in the window, small, steady, framed by the backyard I wasn't done living in the glass. The apple tree stood where it had always stood. The place Alan chose for it, with a hand on my shoulder. The place we'd measured together so we wouldn't crush the marigolds. Some lessons you teach once, some you teach again, because the stakes grow with the child. Either way, the line only works if you keep it. The afternoon was warm, the kind of deceptive calm that makes you think nothing will happen, until it does. I was in the kitchen rinsing peaches when the motion alert blinked on the small monitor by the sink. I glanced at the screen. The side gate. The image was grainy but clear enough. Daniel's shoulder coming into frame. Carla, just behind him, both of them carrying something long and narrow, wood planks, maybe. Before I could even reach the door, the system Ralph had set up, kicked in by voice came first. .com but amplified. "Private property. Permission required. Please step back." They didn't. The LED lights under the deck washed the boards in cold white, and the second message followed. "Alert. Unauthorized access. Irrigation system will activate." Daniel muttered something I couldn't hear, and Carla laughed, not kindly, but with that watch me tone. He took another step. The sprinkler arced, perfect and deliberate, catching both of them at the shins. Carla jerked back, her hair whipping across her cheek. Daniel cursed. By the time I opened the back door, they were both wet and angry. "What is this, Mom?" Daniel demanded, gesturing toward the sprinkler like it had personally insulted him. "It's called respecting property lines," I said, stepping out. "I told you. Asked first. We were just..." Carla started. "No," I cut in. "You weren't just anything. You were crossing the line. Again. And now you've been reminded in the simplest way possible." Daniel's jaw tightened. "You think this little system is going to stop me?" "It already did," I said. They stood there dripping, the wood planks still in his hands. For a moment, I thought he might drop them and walk away. Instead, he placed them deliberately back on their side of the fence. "Fine," he said. "For now." Daniel's smile was slow, cold. He set the hammer down and stepped closer, close enough that I could see the dirt under his nails. "Then, I guess we'll see how much you're willing to lose to prove it." Carla's eyes slid past me to the yard, to Sophie's dogwood and Peter's maple, and I caught it. The calculation, the search for another way in, but they left, and the gate closed, and the warning system, silent now, went back to waiting. It's been 3 weeks since the day they tried to take the apple tree. The rope marks are still there, faint grooves in the bark. I run my hand over them sometimes, not because I like to remember, but because I need to. The tree is still standing. So am I. Daniel hasn't been by since. Carla sent a short text about a school recital for Lucy, but I didn't reply. Not because I don't care about my granddaughter, I do, but because I know every word right now will be read like a legal document, weighed for weakness. The yard feels different now, not peaceful, exactly, more like a guarded border. I still tend the garden, still water the flower beds in the early morning, but I lock the gate when I'm done. I never used to lock it before. Sometimes, I see Lucy's little face pressed to the fence, peeking through the slats. She always waves. I always wave back. But Carla never looks up from her phone. The neighbors have stopped asking questions, but I can feel their curiosity. In small towns, silence is never empty, it's just words waiting for the right ears. And I know some of those words are mine. Yesterday, I found something on the back steps. Not a ball, not a toy, but a single red folding chair. Closed, leaning neatly against the wall. No note, no explanation. Just there. I didn't move it. I didn't bring it inside, didn't throw it out. I left it exactly where it was, like an unspoken answer to an unasked question. Sometimes, when I stand at the kitchen window, coffee in hand, I catch myself looking at the tree, not for beauty, but for proof that some things can stand their ground, even when people try to cut them down. I don't know when they'll make their next move, but I do know this: the line has been drawn, and it runs right through the grass, under the shade of the apple tree.